The scream tore through the forest at dawn, raw and guttural, and Piers Malone dropped his axe mid-swing to sprint toward the sound before his mind could catch up with his legs. He crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at his face, his heart hammering against his ribs. The old pine forest was dangerous territory, sitting right on the border between human settlements and orc lands, and most folk avoided it, except for the occasional desperate hunter or foolhardy traveler. Piers had been cutting firewood at the forest's edge when that cry had pierced the morning stillness. It had sounded like agony and fury combined, and despite every instinct that told him to turn back, he found himself running toward it. When he burst into a small clearing, he stopped so suddenly he nearly fell forward. A massive pine tree, easily 3 feet wide at the base, had fallen during the night. Its enormous trunk lay across the clearing like the body of some ancient beast, and beneath it, trapped from the waist down, was an orc woman. Piers froze. His grandfather's warnings echoed in his mind, stories of orc raiders who had burned farms and killed settlers 20 years ago. But the woman pinned beneath the tree was not raiding anyone. She was trapped, her green-skinned face contorted with pain and exhaustion, her small tusks bared as she sucked in ragged breaths. Her pointed ears lay flat against her skull, and her dark hair was matted with pine needles and dirt. Their eyes met across the clearing. Hers were amber, bright and alert despite her obvious suffering, and they narrowed with immediate suspicion. "Stay back, human," she growled, her voice hoarse. She braced her hands against the massive trunk and tried to push, her muscular arms straining. The tree did not budge even a fraction of an inch. A sound of frustration escaped her throat, almost a sob, and she slumped back against the ground. Piers took a cautious step forward, his hands raised. "I heard you scream. Are you hurt badly? What do you think?" She snapped, but there was less venom in her tone than sheer exhaustion. "I have been pinned here since yesterday morning. The tree came down during the storm. Yesterday morning. That meant she had been trapped here for over 24 hours. Piers looked at the size of the pine, then at the woman's position beneath it. The tree had fallen at an angle, with a boulder on one side creating a small pocket that had probably saved her from being crushed entirely. But her legs were completely pinned beneath tons of solid wood. "Can you feel your legs?" Piers asked. Moving closer despite her warning glare, she hesitated as if debating whether to answer. "Yes, they hurt like fire. I can move my toes, but I cannot get free." That was good news, at least. If she could feel and move, nothing was completely crushed. But the longer she remained trapped, the more danger she faced from muscle damage, loss of circulation, or infection if the skin was broken. Piers walked around the fallen tree, assessing the situation from all angles. The pine had come down with tremendous force, its roots torn completely from the earth. The crown of branches on the far end was tangled in other trees, creating a complex mess of wood and foliage. He could not simply drag it away, and even with a team of horses, the angle was all wrong. "You should go," the orc woman said quietly. "Before others of my clan come looking, they will not be kind to a human they find near me." "Are they looking for you?" She shook her head slightly. "I was alone, hunting. They will not expect me back for days yet." "Then they would not find me," Piers said, squatting down to look at how the tree lay across her body. "What is your name? Why do you care, human? Because if I am going to get you out from under this tree, I ought to know what to call you." She stared at him for a long moment, those amber eyes searching his face for signs of deception or cruelty. Finally, she said, "Kara. My name is Kara. I am Piers." He stood and walked back to where his axe lay in the underbrush where he had dropped it in his haste. When he returned with it, Kara's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "I am going to cut through the tree," Piers said simply. "It is the only way to free you without a team of draft horses and a dozen men, and you said yourself your clan is not coming. By the time I could get help from the nearest settlement, it would be another full day, maybe more." "You cannot cut through a pine this size alone," Kara protested. "It would take days. Then I had better get started." Piers positioned himself near where the tree pinned her, examining the trunk carefully. He would need to make his cut on the side away from her, so that when the section was removed, he could lever it up and pull her free. He touched the bark, estimating 3 feet of solid pine. She was right that it would take a very long time. But what else could he do? He raised his axe and brought it down in a powerful arc. The blade bit into the wood with a solid thunk. Chips flew. He pulled the axe free and swung again, and again. Kara watched him in silence for several minutes, her expression unreadable. Finally she said, "Why are you helping me? Your kind hates mine." Piers paused to wipe sweat from his forehead. The morning was still cool, but the work was already heating his blood. "My kind," he said slowly, "includes some who hate. It also includes some who do not. I try to be the latter." "Pretty words, but I am Orc. Your people tell stories of us, make us into monsters for your children to fear." "Some do," Piers acknowledged. He swung the axe again, settling into a rhythm. "My grandfather told those stories. He fought in the border wars, but my mother used to say that fear makes people cruel, and cruelty makes them into the very monsters they claim to fight against." He paused. "I am not going to leave you here to die just because of what you are. That would make me the monster." Kara said nothing to that, but something in her expression softened fractionally. Piers worked steadily as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The repetitive motion of swinging the axe, the bite of the blade into wood, the shower of chips and sawdust, all of it became a kind of meditation. His shoulders began to burn. His hands, tough from years of farm work, nonetheless started to blister where they gripped the handle. Around midday, he had to stop to rest. He sat heavily on the ground, his chest heaving, and examined his progress. He had cut perhaps 6 inches into the 3-foot trunk. At this rate, it would indeed take days. "There is a stream," Kara said quietly, 50 paces that direction." She nodded toward the north. "If you are thirsty, are you? I drank rain during the storm yesterday, but yes, I am thirsty." Piers found the stream easily enough, a narrow ribbon of clear water tumbling over smooth stones. He drank deeply, the cold water shocking his system in the best way, then removed his shirt and dunked it in the stream. He wrung it out and brought it back dripping wet. Kara watched him approach with those wary amber eyes. When he knelt beside her and offered the wet cloth, she hesitated. "It is clean water," he said. "For drinking, or if you want to cool your face." Slowly, she reached out and took the shirt from him. She held it above her mouth and squeezed, letting the water trickle onto her tongue. She drank until the fabric yielded no more moisture, then pressed the cool cloth against her forehead and closed her eyes with a sigh. "Thank you," she murmured. "Have you eaten?" Piers asked. "Not since yesterday morning before the tree fell." Piers had brought nothing with him in his sprint through the forest, but his small cabin was not far from here. "I will be back," he said, standing. Kara's eyes flew open. "You are leaving?" There was something in her voice, a note of panic quickly suppressed that made his chest tighten. She had been alone out here for a full day and night already, trapped and helpless. The thought of being abandoned now, even temporarily, must be terrifying. "Only to get food," he said gently, "and better tools. I will return before the sun moves another hand's width, I swear it." She studied his face, then nodded once. "I will hold you to that oath, Piers." He ran back through the forest, his tired legs protesting, and gathered what he needed from his cabin. Bread, dried meat, a water skin, a smaller hatchet, and his wood saw. The saw would be better for the methodical work of cutting through the trunk. He also grabbed a worn blanket, having noticed that Kara had been lying on the cold ground with no covering. When he returned to the clearing, he saw relief flash across Kara's face before she schooled her expression back to neutrality. He spread the blanket beside her, then gently lifted her shoulders to help her shift onto it. She was heavy with muscle, and moving her made her grunt with pain as the pressure on her trapped legs changed, but once she settled onto the blanket, she breathed easier. "Better?" he asked. "Better," she admitted. They shared the food, Piers tearing the bread and meat into portions and handing them to her. She ate with the hunger of someone who had been too long without, barely chewing before swallowing. He filled the waterskin at the stream and let her drink her fill. "Tell me about yourself," she said as he prepared to resume work. "If you are going to saw through a tree for me, I should know who you are." "Not much to tell," Piers said, positioning the saw at his cut mark. "I am a farmer. I have a homestead about a mile from here at the edge of the settled lands. I raise chickens, keep a vegetable garden, cut firewood to sell in town. Simple life." "Alone," he confirmed, beginning to work the saw back and forth. The teeth bit into the wood more efficiently than the axe had, pulling out long curls of pale pine. "My parents died of fever 5 years ago. I was their only child. No wife. No," he did not elaborate, focusing on the saw. The truth was that he was 26 and thoroughly unmarried, which made him an oddity in the settlements. But the few young women in the scattered frontier communities had never interested him, and the feeling had been mutual. He was too quiet, too content with his own company, too unambitious in their eyes. "And you?" he asked after a moment. "Tell me about Kara." She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "I am a hunter for my clan. We live in the high hills 2 days north of here. I have 23 years. I also have no husband, which makes me strange among my people. Orc women usually bond young. Why have you not?" "Because the males in my clan are idiots," she said bluntly, and Piers surprised himself by laughing. A fair reason. They fell into a pattern over the long afternoon. Piers would work the saw until his arms screamed and his shoulders felt like fire, then he would rest while they talked. Kara told him about her clan, about the politics and hierarchies of Orc society, about the pressure she faced to choose a mate and produce strong children for the clan's future. Piers told her about his quiet life on the farm, about the books he had inherited from his mother and spent his evenings reading, about the time a bear had gotten into his chicken coop, and he had chased it off with nothing but a cooking pot and fury. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the forest in shades of amber and gold, Piers had cut nearly halfway through the massive trunk. His hands were raw despite the calluses, and every muscle in his upper body throbbed with exhaustion. "You should rest," Kara said. "You have been working all day. You will hurt yourself." "I am fine." "You are swaying on your feet. I can see you, Piers. You are not fine." He set down the saw and sat heavily on the ground beside her, too tired to argue. The moment he stopped moving, the full weight of his exhaustion crashed over him. His hands were shaking. Kara reached out and took one of his hands in both of hers, turning it over to examine his palm. Her skin was warm and rough, her fingers strong. She traced the edge of a raw blister with surprising gentleness. "You are destroying your hands for me," she said quietly. "They will heal." "Why are you doing this?" There was something desperate in her voice now, a kind of anguished confusion. "You do not know me. I am nothing to you. I am not even human. Why are you hurting yourself to save me?" Piers met her amber eyes. In the golden light of the setting sun, her green skin seemed to glow, and he was struck by how beautiful she was. Not in the delicate way of the human women he had known, but in a fierce, wild way that made his breath catch. "Because it is right," he said simply. "And because no one deserves to die alone and afraid, pinned under a tree in the middle of nowhere. Not you. Not anyone." Her eyes glistened and she blinked rapidly. She released his hand and turned her face away. "I think you might be the first truly good person I have ever met, Piers Malone." "I am just stubborn," he said, trying to lighten the moment. "My mother used to say I was too stubborn to know when to quit." Kara laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Well, I am grateful for your stubborn streak then." The light was fading too quickly to continue sawing safely. Piers knew he should go back to his cabin for the night, sleep in his own bed, and return fresh in the morning. But the thought of leaving Kara alone in the dark forest, still trapped and vulnerable, made his stomach turn. "I am staying," he announced. "What? I am staying here tonight. I will go back to my cabin to get supplies, but then I am staying." "Piers, you do not have to do that." "I know. But I am going to anyway." He made a quick trip back to his homestead in the deepening twilight, gathering what he needed. A bedroll, more food, his flint and steel, and a heavy coat. When he returned to the clearing, full dark had fallen. He built a small fire a safe distance from the fallen tree, the flames pushing back the darkness and casting dancing shadows across the trunks of the surrounding pines. Kara watched him spread his bedroll near the fire. "I am not sure how I am supposed to feel about this," she said. "Feel however you want," Piers said, settling down onto his blankets. "I am too tired to care." She laughed again, and he realized he was starting to love that sound. They talked quietly across the space between them, their voices low as the fire crackled and the night insects sang their songs. Kara told him about the stars according to Orc traditions, pointing out constellations he had never heard of. He told her the human names for the same patterns of light, and they debated which stories were better. Eventually, her voice grew slower, heavier with exhaustion. Piers lay quietly, listening to her breathing deepen and even out as she fell asleep. He stayed awake longer, feeding the fire and watching the darkness beyond its light. Somewhere out there were wolves and bears and other dangers. He had no weapon except his axe and the small knife at his belt, but he would stand watch nonetheless. He must have dozed eventually, because he woke with a start to find the fire burned down to coals and the first gray light of dawn filtering through the trees. He sat up, disoriented, and heard a soft sound from Kara's direction. She was crying. Quiet, choked sobs that she was clearly trying to suppress. Piers scrambled out of his bedroll and went to her side, kneeling in the damp grass. "What is wrong? Are your legs worse?" She shook her head, not looking at him. "Everything hurts. I am so tired, and I am frightened, Piers. What if you cannot cut through it? What if I die here? You are not going to die." He said it with absolute conviction. "I am getting you out of here, I swear it on my life." "You should not make oaths like that. Too late. I already made it." She finally looked at him, tears tracking through the dirt on her face. Without thinking, he reached out and gently wiped them away with his thumb. Her skin was warm and surprisingly soft despite its texture. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for all of this. I do not think I would have lasted another day alone." "You do not have to thank me," Piers said. "And you are not alone, not anymore." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went beyond words. Kara's hand came up to cover his where it rested against her cheek, and they stayed like that as the dawn light grew stronger around them. Piers forced himself to pull away and stand. "I am going to finish this today," he declared, "no matter how long it takes." He built up the fire to boil water for tea, sharing the simple breakfast he had brought. Then he positioned himself at the saw cut and began to work. His hands were stiff and painful at first, the blisters from yesterday protesting every motion, but he pushed through it. He had made a promise and he intended to keep it. The hours blurred together. Pull, push, pull, push, the steady rhythm of the saw. His world narrowed to the bite of the teeth into wood, the shower of sawdust, the slowly widening cut. Kara spoke to him sometimes, encouraging him or simply talking to give him something to focus on besides the pain. Other times she was quiet, letting him work in peace. By midday, he had cut 2/3 of the way through the trunk. He could feel the wood starting to stress. The way the saw pulled differently as the weight of the tree began to shift. He had to be careful now. If he miscalculated, the tree could shift the wrong way and crush Kara instead of freeing her. When this last section gives way, he said, pausing to catch his breath, the tree is going to shift. I need you to be ready to pull yourself back as soon as you feel the pressure release. Can you do that? Kara's face was pale under her green skin, tight with tension. I think so. My legs feel numb now, but I can move my arms. Good. I am going to cut through the last bit, then use my axe as a lever to lift this section. The moment you feel it lift, you pull yourself out. Understand? I understand. Piers positioned his axe within easy reach, then took up the saw again. Each stroke now felt momentous. He was so close, just a little more. The saw a bit deeper and he heard a subtle crack from within the wood as the fibers began to fail. Get ready, he warned, 3 more strokes. The crack grew louder, the tree shuddered. Now. Piers dropped the saw and grabbed his axe, jamming the head under the trunk right at the cut point. He threw all his weight onto the handle, using it as a lever. The section of tree lifted, just barely, just an inch or two, but it was enough. Kara cried out and dragged herself backward, her arms straining. Piers saw her legs emerge from under the trunk, her leather trousers torn and soaked with blood. The moment she was clear, he let the tree fall back with a ground-shaking thud. He dropped to his knees beside her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Are you out? Are you clear? I am out, she said, and then she started laughing and crying at the same time. I am out. Oh gods, I am out. Piers carefully examined her legs, trying to be clinical despite his exhaustion. Both were badly bruised and scraped, and her left leg had a deep gash that was still seeping blood, but miraculously nothing appeared to be broken. She tried to move her feet and gasped with pain. Do not try to stand, Piers said. You need to rest. Let the blood flow back properly. You have been compressed for too long. Moving too quickly could cause serious damage. I am a hunter, Kara said through gritted teeth. I know about injuries. I just needed to be free of that cursed tree. She lay back on the ground, her chest heaving, and covered her face with her hands. Her whole body was shaking. Piers sat beside her, his own hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. He had done it. Against all logic, against all odds, he had cut through a 3-foot pine tree with hand tools and freed her. He had never been so tired in his entire life. They rested there in the clearing for a long while, neither speaking, both simply absorbing the reality that it was over. The sun was past its peak now, beginning the long slide toward evening. Piers knew they could not stay here much longer. Night would bring cold and predators, and Kara needed proper care for her injuries. Can you walk at all? He asked eventually. Kara tried to sit up and immediately went white. The pain is very bad. I think I could manage a few steps, but not far. How far is your home? About a mile. I will never make it that far. Piers looked at her, then at the darkening sky, then back at her. Then I will carry you. You cannot be serious. Have you looked at me? I am not some delicate human woman. I have the muscle of a warrior. I must weigh close to 200 pounds. Then it is a good thing I am stubborn, is it not? Before she could protest further, Piers stood and positioned himself beside her. Can you get your arms around my neck? Piers, this is madness. probably. But what choice do we have? I am not leaving you here and you cannot walk. This is the only option. Kara stared at him for a long moment, then slowly sat up, biting back a cry of pain. She reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck. Piers slid one arm under her knees and the other around her back, then took a deep breath and lifted. She was indeed heavy, her dense muscle making her weight substantial. But Piers had spent years working a farm, hauling water and feed sacks and timber. He straightened with a grunt, adjusting her weight in his arms, and took a few experimental steps. "I am going to hurt you," Kara said, her voice tight. "You are not. Hold on." He started walking, each step deliberate and careful. His shoulders, already destroyed from 2 days of sawing, screamed in protest. His legs shook. But he kept moving, one foot in front of the other, carrying her through the forest toward his home. Kara was silent in his arms, her face pressed against his shoulder. He could feel her heartbeat, strong and rapid, could feel the tension in her body as she tried to hold herself still and not make it harder for him. The mile-long journey was the longest of Piers's life. He had to stop every few hundred yards to rest, setting Kara down carefully before his shaking legs could give out beneath them. Each time he stopped, she would insist that she could try to walk, that he was killing himself carrying her. Each time he would catch his breath, lift her again, and keep going. The sun was touching the horizon when his cabin finally came into view through the trees. Its rough timber walls and sod roof, the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. He staggered the last 100 yards and shouldered through the door, making it to the bed in the corner before his strength finally gave out. He lowered Kara onto the straw mattress as gently as he could, then collapsed to his knees beside the bed, gasping for air. "You did it," Kara said, wonder in her voice. "You carried me all this way." "I told you I was stubborn," Piers managed. He knelt there until his breathing steadied and his vision stopped swimming, then forced himself to his feet. Kara needed care. He could rest later. Piers had some skill with basic medicine, learned from his mother who had served as an informal healer for the scattered homesteads in the area. He built up the fire in the hearth and set water to boil, then gathered his supplies. Clean cloth for bandages, a bottle of harsh spirits for disinfecting, needle and thread for stitching, dried herbs that would help prevent infection. "I need to clean your wounds," he said, returning to the bedside. "And that cut on your leg needs stitches. It is going to hurt." "I have survived worse," Kara said, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He worked as quickly and gently as he could, cleaning the dirt and debris from her scraped and bruised legs. She bore it stoically, only occasionally letting out a soft hiss of pain. The cut on her left calf was the worst of it, a 4-inch gash that had gone deep. He poured the spirits over it and she jerked, her hands fisting in the blanket. "I am sorry," Piers murmured. "Just finish it." He threaded the needle and began to stitch, small, careful stitches to pull the edges of the wound together. Kara watched him work, her jaw clenched, her breathing controlled. When he finally tied off the last stitch and bandaged the wound, she let out a long, shaky breath. "Done?" she asked. "Done. You need to stay off those legs for several days at least, maybe a week. The bruising is severe and moving too soon risks tearing the stitches." "Where will I go? My clan is 2 days north and I clearly cannot walk." "You will stay here," Piers said simply. "I have the space and you need to heal. I cannot impose on you like that. You have already done so much." "Kara." He met her eyes. "Stop arguing with me. You are staying here until you can walk properly, and that is the end of it." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You are bossy when you want to be. I am practical. There is a difference." He made a simple stew from vegetables and dried meat, and they ate together as darkness fell fully outside. Piers had only the one bed, so he spread his bedroll on the floor near the fire, insisting that Kara take the bed. She protested, but he could see that she was beyond exhausted, her body finally giving in to the trauma of the past 2 days. He banked the fire and lay down on the floor, his own body one massive ache. Every muscle hurt. His hands were destroyed, blistered, and raw. His shoulders felt like someone had been beating them with hammers. But Kara was safe, she was free, and she would heal. That was all that mattered. Piers. Her voice came soft through the darkness. Yes, thank you for everything. I know I have said it before, but I need you to understand. You saved my life. I owe you a debt I can never repay. You do not owe me anything. I did what anyone should have done. But anyone would not have done it. That is the point. You are not anyone. You are extraordinary. He had no answer to that. He lay silent, listening to her breathing gradually deepen and slow as sleep took her. For the first time in 2 days, she was truly safe and warm and cared for. Piers woke before dawn to find pale light filtering through the cabin's small window and Kara awake, watching him. She was propped up on one elbow in the bed, her dark hair falling around her face, and there was something soft in her expression that made his heart skip. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning. How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a horse and then run over by a wagon." He sat up slowly, wincing as every muscle protested. My legs hurt terribly. But I am alive, and that is more than I thought I would be 3 days ago." Piers built up the fire and made a simple breakfast of porridge and tea. He brought Kara her portion and checked her bandages while she ate. The wounds looked clean, no signs of infection yet, though the bruising had deepened overnight to ugly shades of purple and black. "I need to go check on my chickens," Piers said, "and gather eggs. I will be back shortly." "I am not going anywhere," Kara said wryly. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the air smelling of pine and earth. Piers's small farm consisted of the cabin, a chicken coop, a vegetable garden, and a small shed for tools. It was humble, but it was his, built with his own hands after his parents died. The chickens were agitated after being neglected for a day, clucking their complaints loudly as he fed them and gathered eggs. He took his time with the morning chores, giving Kara privacy and giving himself space to process everything that had happened. He had an orc woman in his cabin. An injured orc woman who would be staying with him for at least a week, possibly more. If anyone from the settlements found out, there would be trouble. Tensions between humans and orcs remained high even 20 years after the border wars. Most humans still saw orcs as monsters, as enemies. And orcs, for their part, had little reason to trust humans. But Kara was none of the things the stories claimed. She was brave and proud and surprisingly gentle. She had a sharp wit and a lovely laugh. And when she looked at him, he felt something he had never felt before, a warmth that spread through his chest and made him want to smile for no reason. He was in dangerous territory, and he knew it. When he returned to the cabin, Kara was attempting to stand, using the bedpost for support. She had managed to get to her feet but could put no weight on her injured left leg, and her right leg was shaking badly. "What are you doing?" Piers asked, setting down the basket of eggs. "I need to relieve myself. I did not want to ask for help with something so personal." "Pride is going to make you fall and tear your stitches." He crossed to her side and offered his arm. "Lean on me." Together, they made the slow journey to the privy behind the cabin. Piers waited outside, giving her privacy, then helped her make the painful trip back. By the time she was settled in bed again, she was pale and breathing hard. "I hate being helpless," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "You are not helpless. You are injured. There is a difference." "It does not feel different." Over the following days, they settled into a routine. Piers would wake early to tend his farm and gather what they needed. then spend the rest of the day in the cabin with Kara. He cooked their meals, changed her bandages, and helped her when she needed to move. They talked for hours, sharing stories and ideas, debating everything from the best way to track deer to the meaning of dreams. Piers learned that Kara had lost her parents young, killed in a skirmish with human soldiers when she was barely 10 years old. She had been raised by her clan as a whole, taught to hunt and fight and survive. She was expected to be hard, to be strong, to put the clan's needs before her own. The idea of individual happiness was foreign to Orc culture. You did what was best for the group always. "That sounds lonely," Piers said. They were sitting together on the bed, a rare moment of closeness. Kara had been practicing bearing weight on her legs, and Piers was sitting beside her in case she needed support. Their shoulders touched, a point of warmth between them. "It is the only way I have known," Kara said. "Until now." "What is different now?" She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how beautiful her amber eyes were. "You are different. This is different. You have shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. You have treated me as a person, not as a warrior or a breeding female or a monster, just as Kara. No one has ever done that before." "I like Kara," Piers said quietly. "I like her very much." The air between them felt charged, heavy with words unsaid. Kara's hand moved to cover his where it rested on the blanket, her strong fingers intertwining with his. "I like Piers too," she whispered. "More than I should, more than is wise." "Why is it not wise?" "Because we are enemies. Because our people have spent generations fighting and killing each other. Because even if we wanted something more between us, the world would never allow it." "The world does not get to choose," Piers said. "We do. If only it were that simple." But she did not pull her hand away from his, and they sat like that, as the afternoon light slanted through the window, neither speaking, both acutely aware of the line they were dancing along. By the end of the first week, Kara could stand and walk short distances with the help of a stick Piers had carved for her. The stitches were holding, the wounds showed no sign of infection, and the bruising had begun to fade from black to green. She was healing well, faster than a human would have, and they both knew that soon she would be well enough to leave. Neither of them spoke about it. One evening, as they sat together by the fire after dinner, Kara said, "Tell me about your parents. You mention them sometimes, but never in detail." Piers stared into the flames, old grief stirring in his chest. "My mother was kind. She knew herbs and healing, and people would come from miles around when they were sick or hurt. She believed in helping everyone, regardless of who they were. My father was quieter, more practical. He taught me to farm, to work with wood, to be self-sufficient. They loved each other very much. You could see it in the way they looked at each other, even after 20 years of marriage. That must have been beautiful to witness. It was. It also made their deaths harder. They died within a day of each other. The fever took my mother first, and my father just seemed to give up after she was gone. He had no will to fight it. I am sorry, that kind of loss leaves scars." "It does." He looked at her. "What about you? Do you remember your parents a little?" "My mother was fierce. She could hunt better than any male in the clan. My father was a warrior who sang. I remember him singing while he sharpened his blades, old songs in the Orc tongue. When they died, the songs stopped. No one else knew them." "Sing one for me," Piers said impulsively. "What?" "One of your father's songs. Sing it, I want to hear." Kara looked uncertain, almost shy, an expression he had never seen on her strong features. "I am not a singer, and I do not remember all the words. I do not care, please." She took a breath, then began to sing, her voice low and rough but carrying a haunting melody. The words were in the Orc language, guttural and strange to Piers's ears but beautiful in their own way. He watched her as she sang, saw the way her eyes grew distant, lost in memory. When she finished, her voice trailing off into silence, there were tears on her cheeks. "That was incredible," Piers said softly. "I have not sung that since they died. I had forgotten how much I missed it." He reached out and gently wiped away her tears, just as he had done that morning in the forest when she was still trapped. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Their faces were very close now. He could feel her breath, warm against his lips. His heart was hammering in his chest. All he would have to do was lean forward just a little and he could kiss her. He wanted to kiss her so badly it was almost a physical ache, but he did not. Because kissing her would change everything, would make real the feelings that were growing between them, and once that happened, there would be no going back. And he was not sure she was ready for that. He was not sure he was ready for that. So instead he pulled back slightly and stood, offering her his hand to help her to bed. She took it, her eyes searching his face, questions in their amber depths. But she did not ask them aloud, and he did not offer answers. That night, lying on his bedroll by the fire, Piers could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling beams, listening to Kara's soft breathing from the bed, and admitted to himself what he had been trying to deny for days. He was falling in love with her. It was impossible and foolish and dangerous, but it was true. Somewhere between pulling her from under that tree and sitting with her by the fire singing songs of the dead, he had lost his heart completely, and he had no idea what to do about it. The answer came 2 days later, in the form of voices outside the cabin. Piers was in the garden harvesting vegetables when he heard them. Rough male voices speaking in the Orcish tongue. His blood went cold. He dropped the basket and ran for the cabin. Kara was standing by the window, leaning heavily on her walking stick, her face pale. "My clan," she said. "They have found me." Piers looked out the window and saw 3 orc males approaching the cabin. They were taller and broader than Kara, their green skin marked with scars, their tusks larger and more prominent. They carried weapons, crude but effective, and they did not look friendly. "They will kill you if they find you with me," Kara said urgently. "You have to hide." "I am not hiding in my own home. Piers, please. They will not understand. They will think you captured me or hurt me. Then you will tell them the truth. It will not matter. They will kill you anyway just for being human." The orcs were almost to the door now. Piers could hear them talking, their voices low and threatening. He moved to stand between Kara and the door, his hands empty but his stance protective. The door slammed open without preamble and the 3 orcs filled the doorway. The largest, a male with a scar bisecting his face from forehead to jaw, looked from Piers to Kara and back again. His expression darkened with rage. "Kara," he rumbled in the common tongue, heavily accented. "What is this? Why are you with a human, Groth?" Kara said, relief and fear mixed in her voice. "I am glad you found me. I was injured, trapped by a fallen tree. This human, Piers, he saved my life. He cut me free and brought me here to heal." The orc called Groth did not look convinced. "Why would a human help an orc? More likely he is keeping you prisoner. Step away from him, Kara." "I am not his prisoner. He has treated me with nothing but kindness. Kindness from a human." Groth spat on the floor. "You expect me to believe that?" The other 2 orcs were moving into the cabin now, spreading out to flank Piers. He did not move, did not reach for a weapon, though his axe was leaning against the wall within reach. Any aggressive move now would mean his death. "It is the truth," Kara insisted. She took a painful step forward, putting herself beside Piers rather than behind him. "He spent 2 days sawing through a tree to free me. He carried me a mile to his home when I could not walk. He tended my wounds and gave me his own bed. He asked for nothing in return. He saved my life, Groth." Groth's eyes narrowed as he looked at the walking stick, at the way Kara was favoring her left leg. "You are injured." "Yes, as I said. The tree crushed my legs. Without Piers, I would have died under it." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. The three orc males were all staring at Piers with a mixture of suspicion and barely controlled violence. He knew that one wrong word, one wrong move would end with his blood on the floor. "I want only for Kara to be safe," Piers said carefully, speaking directly to Groth. "I meant her no harm." "I mean her no harm. When she is fully healed, she may go where she wishes. She is no prisoner here." "No," said one of the other orcs, speaking for the first time. "She is not. She is coming with us now." "Drac, wait," Kara said. "I am not healed enough to travel. The journey to the clan lands is 2 days on foot. I cannot walk that far yet." "Then we will carry you," Groth said. "You are not staying here with this human. It is not proper." "Proper?" Kara's voice rose with anger. "What is not proper is that none of you came looking for me when I was trapped and dying. What is not proper is that you would let me die rather than accept help from a human who has shown me more honor than any orc male I have known." Groth's face darkened further. "Watch your tongue, female." "Or what? You will strike me. You will drag me home against my will. I am a free hunter of the clan, not your property." "You are an unmarked female of breeding age," Groth said coldly. "That makes you the clan's concern. You will return with us." "No," Kara said. "I will not." The word hung in the air like a blade. Piers felt his heart stop. What was she doing? Groth took a step forward, his hand moving to the weapon at his belt. "That was not a request, Kara." Piers moved without thinking, putting himself between Groth and Kara. "She said no. If you want to take her, you will have to go through me." It was monumentally stupid. He was unarmed, outnumbered, and facing 3 trained orc warriors. He was going to die, but he would be damned if he let them take Kara against her will. Groth stared at him, genuine confusion replacing the anger on his face. "You would die for her, for an orc?" "Yes," Piers said simply. "Why? Because she is Kara, and I care what happens to her." Something shifted in the room. The other 2 orcs exchanged glances. Groth tilted his head, studying Piers with new eyes. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met," Groth said slowly, "or the most foolish." "Probably both," Piers admitted. To his shock, Groth laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound, but genuine. "I think I might like you human." "You have stones," standing up to 3 orc warriors with nothing but your bare hands. He looked at Kara. "Is what you said true? Did he really save you?" "Every word. He spent 2 days cutting through a pine tree to free me. Look." Kara gestured to her bandaged leg. "These are his stitches. His care. He could have left me to die, any human would have, but he did not." Groth was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Show me where the tree fell." Piers led them back through the forest to the clearing. The massive pine still lay where it had fallen, the trunk now cut cleanly through where Kara had been trapped. The saw marks were obvious, long and deep, showing days of hard labor. Groth examined the cut, ran his hands over the severed wood, then looked back at Piers. "You did this alone?" "Yes." "This tree is 3 feet thick." "I know. I cut through it." Groth shook his head slowly. "That would take days of hard labor. The pain in your hands alone would be enough to make most men quit." "I could not quit." Kara needed help. The orc warrior studied him for another long moment, then did something Piers never expected. He held out his hand, the orc gesture of respect and peace. "You have my thanks, Piers Malone. You saved one of our clan when you had no reason to do so. That is a debt we will not forget." Piers took the offered hand, relief flooding through him. "I need no repayment. I did what anyone should have done. But most would not have. That makes the deed more valuable, not less." Groth looked at Kara. If you wish to remain here until you are fully healed, I will not force you to return. But the clan will expect you eventually. I understand, Kara said quietly. The 3 orc males left shortly after, disappearing back into the forest toward their clan lands. Piers and Kara stood in the clearing for a long moment after they were gone, the silence almost uncomfortable. You told them no, Piers said. I did. Why? She turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw everything he felt reflected back at him. Fear and hope and longing all tangled together. Because I am not ready to leave, she said. Because for the first time in my life, I am somewhere I want to be. Because when I think about going back to the clan, about never seeing you again, it feels like someone is tearing my heart out of my chest. Piers took a step toward her, then another, until they were standing close enough to touch. Kara, I know it is impossible, she continued, the words spilling out now like water from a broken dam. I know our peoples are enemies. I know that there is no future for us, no way this ends that does not break both our hearts, but I cannot make myself care. I cannot make myself want to leave you. Then do not leave, Piers said. Stay with me, not just until you heal, stay. You do not know what you are asking. If I stay, if we try to build something together, we will face hatred from both sides. Humans will call you a traitor, an orc lover. My clan will cast me out, consider me dead to them. We would have only each other. Then we would have everything that matters, Piers said. He took her face gently in his hands, careful of her tusks, and looked into her eyes. I love you, Kara. I think I have loved you since you took my ruined hands in yours and asked why I was destroying myself to save you. I do not care what anyone else thinks or says. I only care about you. Her eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone, especially not a human. But you are not just a human to me. You are Piers. You are brave and stubborn and kind. You are everything good in this world, and I love you so much it terrifies me. He kissed her then, finally closing the distance between them. Her lips were warm and soft despite her tusks, and when she kissed him back, it felt like coming home. His hands slid into her dark hair, and hers came up to grip his shoulders, holding him close as if she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Piers rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he whispered again. Please. Yes, Kara said. Yes, I will stay. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, Kara leaning on Piers for support, both of them smiling like fools. The world might call them crazy. Their peoples might reject them. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The days that followed were the happiest of Piers's life. Kara's leg continued to heal, growing stronger each day, and as her mobility returned, they fell into a new kind of routine. She would help him with the farm work as much as she was able, learning to tend the chickens and weed the garden. He taught her to cook human dishes, and she taught him to prepare the foods of her people. They worked side by side during the day and fell asleep in each other's arms at night, Piers having given up his bedroll on the floor for the warmth of lying beside her. 3 weeks after Groth and the others had come and gone, Kara's leg was fully healed. The stitches had been removed, leaving only a pale scar against her green skin. She could walk without pain, could run and climb and hunt as she had before the tree fell. She was completely recovered. I should go back to the clan, she said one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. Just to tell them formally that I am choosing to leave. I owe them that much. Fear clutched at Piers's heart, but he nodded. Do you want me to come with you? No, it will go easier if I speak to them alone, but I will return, Piers, I swear it. I know, I trust you. She left at dawn the next morning, moving through the forest with the easy grace of a born hunter. Piers watched her go until she disappeared among the trees, then turned back to his cabin feeling hollow. He trusted her. He did. But the fear remained, whispering that perhaps she would return to her clan and realize she belonged there, not with a human in the middle of nowhere. The day dragged endlessly. He threw himself into work, repairing the chicken coop, clearing a new section of land for planting next season, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. When night fell and Kara had not returned, he tried to tell himself it was normal. The clan lands were 2 days away. She could not possibly make it back in one day, but he still barely slept, starting awake at every sound in the darkness. The second day was worse. He worked until his hands bled and his body screamed, but nothing could quiet the growing dread in his gut. What if the clan had refused to let her go? What if Groth had changed his mind and decided Piers was not worthy of gratitude after all? What if she had been hurt on the journey back? When the sun set on the second day and Kara still had not appeared, Piers made a decision. He would wait until dawn, and if she had not returned by then, he would go after her. Consequences be damned. If the Orc clan wanted to kill him for coming to their lands, so be it. He was not losing her. He was packing supplies by lamplight, preparing for the journey when he heard footsteps outside. He grabbed his axe and threw open the door, ready to fight whatever threat had come. Kara stood in the doorway, illuminated by the lamp light, and she was not alone. Behind her were 3 figures, heavily bundled and hooded against the night chill. Piers tensed, his grip tightening on the axe until the figures pushed back their hoods and he saw they were Orc females, all younger than Kara. They looked exhausted and frightened. "Piers," Kara said, her voice urgent. "I need your help, please. We need shelter." He stepped back immediately, lowering the axe. "Come in, all of you." The 3 young Orc women filed into the cabin, their eyes wide as they took in the human dwelling. Piers stirred up the fire and put water on to boil for tea while Kara herded them to sit on the bed and floor. "What happened?" Piers asked quietly. Kara's face was tight with anger and grief. "The clan elders would not accept my choice to leave. They said I was betraying the clan, that I was being controlled by human magic or lies. Groth tried to speak for you to tell them what you had done, but they would not listen. They said if I chose to leave with you, I would be marked as an exile, dead to the clan." "I am sorry," Piers said, meaning it deeply. "I expected it. I was prepared for it, but these 3—" She gestured to the young women. "They are all like me. Unmated females who do not want to be forced into bonding with males they do not love. When they saw me choosing my own path, they asked to come with me, to find their own way, and the elders were furious. We left in the night. They may send warriors after us." Piers looked at the 4 Orc women now crowded into his small cabin, at the fear and hope mixed in their faces, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. 4 exiles. 4 women with nowhere to go and no one to protect them except him. "You will stay here," he said firmly. "All of you, for as long as you need." "Piers, you do not have space for 5 people in this cabin," Kara protested. "Then we will build more space. I have land. We can expand the cabin, build sleeping quarters. We can make this work." One of the young Orc women, barely more than a girl really, looked at him with wonder. "You would do that? Shelter Orc exiles?" "I would. You are welcome here, all of you." Over the following weeks, life on Piers's small homestead transformed completely. The 3 young Orc women, whose names were Nara, Shala, and Mika, threw themselves into the work of expanding the cabin. They were strong and tireless, hauling timber from the forest and digging foundation trenches. Piers taught them carpentry, and they taught him the Orc methods of construction, which relied less on nails and more on clever joinery and rope lashing. Kara took charge of hunting, keeping them supplied with fresh meat. She also served as a buffer between Piers and the younger women who were wary of him at first. But as the days passed, and they saw how he treated Kara with respect and affection, how he worked alongside them as an equal, their wariness faded. A month after the women had arrived, the expanded cabin was complete. It now had 2 sleeping rooms, one for Piers and Kara, the other for Nara, Shala, and Mika to share. The main room had been expanded as well, with space for a larger table and more storage. They celebrated the completion with a feast, Piers teaching the orc women how to make bread while they showed him how to prepare roasted venison in the orc style, seasoned with wild herbs. They ate until they were stuffed, laughing and talking late into the night. As the fire burned low and the younger women drifted off to their new sleeping room, Piers and Kara remained by the hearth, sitting close together. "I never imagined my life would look like this," Kara said softly. "A month ago I was a lone hunter, living for my clan with no purpose beyond surviving and eventually producing children. Now I am here with you, helping build something new. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I do not want to wake up," Piers said. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Kara, I want to ask you something." She looked at him, curiosity in her eyes. Piers took a breath, his heart pounding. In human custom, when 2 people love each other and want to build a life together, they marry. They make vows before witnesses, promises to stand by each other through whatever comes. "I know it is not the orc way, but I want to ask anyway. Kara, will you marry me?" Her eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. "Marry you?" "Yes, I want you to be my wife. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours. I want to make this official, make it real." "It is already real, Piers. I do not need human ceremonies to know that I am yours. But I want to give you that. I want to give you everything. Please, Kara, marry me." She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw tears begin to slide down her green cheeks. Then she smiled, that beautiful, fierce smile that made his heart soar. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, tasting salt from her tears and the spices from their dinner and joy, pure and sweet. When they finally pulled apart, both were grinning like idiots. "When?" Kara asked. "As soon as we can arrange it. There is a traveling priest who comes through the settlements every few months. When he arrives next, we will ask him to perform the ceremony. Will humans accept a marriage between human and orc? I do not care if they accept it or not. It will be real to us, and that is all that matters." The priest arrived 6 weeks later, an elderly man named Father Dennison who traveled the frontier settlements providing religious services to the scattered homesteaders. Piers met him on the road and made his request. Father Dennison listened with a skeptical expression. "You want me to marry you to an orc woman?" "I do. The church does not recognize such unions. It goes against the natural order. The church also teaches that we should love our neighbors and show mercy to those in need," Piers countered. "Is that not what I am doing?" "That is not the same as marriage. Father Dennison, I am asking you as a man to another man. I love her. She loves me. We want to make vows before God and witnesses. Will you help us?" The old priest studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You are asking me to potentially excommunicate myself for performing a forbidden ceremony. I am asking you to do what is right, not what is approved." Another long silence. Then Father Dennison said, "Where is your homestead?" Piers led him back to the cabin, where Kara and the 3 younger orc women waited nervously. Father Dennison looked at them all, his expression unreadable, then turned to Kara. "Is this your true wish, child, to marry this human?" "It is," Kara said, her voice steady. "I love him. He saved my life and offered me a home when my own people cast me out. I want to be his wife." Father Dennison nodded slowly. Very well. I will perform the ceremony, but I will do it in private with only those here as witnesses, and I will not record it in any official church document. This will be between you, me, and God. Do you understand? We understand, Piers said. Thank you, Father. They held the ceremony that very evening as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Nara, Shala, and Mika picked wildflowers from the meadow and wove them into a crown for Kara's dark hair. Piers wore his best shirt, the one his mother had made for him years ago that he saved for special occasions. Father Dennison stood before them in the small clearing outside the cabin, his prayer book open in his hands. Kara and Piers faced each other, hands clasped, as the old priest spoke the traditional words of the marriage ceremony. Do you, Piers Malone, take this woman Kara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Piers said, his voice strong and clear. And do you, Kara, take this man, Piers Malone, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Kara said, her amber eyes locked on Piers's face. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Piers did, pulling Kara close and kissing her as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the three young orc women cheered and clapped. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. Father Dennison blessed them quietly, then departed, refusing payment but accepting a basket of eggs and vegetables for his journey. As he walked away into the gathering dusk, he turned back once to call, "May God watch over you both. You will need his protection." They celebrated late into the night, Nara producing a flask of strong orc spirits she had somehow hidden in her belongings. They drank and told stories and sang songs in both human and orc tongues. By the time they finally stumbled to bed, Piers was happier than he had ever been in his life. He lay beside Kara in their sleeping room, his wife now, and marveled at how his life had changed. A few months ago he had been alone, content with his solitary existence but never truly happy. Now he had Kara and three unexpected wards who had become like younger sisters. He had a family again, strange and unconventional though it was. "What are you thinking?" Kara murmured, curling against his side. "That I am the luckiest man alive." She laughed softly. "Because you married an orc and took in three more. Because I found you. Everything else is just details." She kissed him, slow and sweet, and whispered against his lips, "I love you, husband. I love you, wife." The following months brought challenges they had not anticipated. Word spread through the settlements about the human who had married an orc and was sheltering 4 orc females on his homestead. Some people were merely curious, making the trek to Piers's land to see the strange household for themselves. Others were hostile, accusing Piers of betraying his own kind or claiming the orc women were dangerous and should be driven out. One group of men from the nearest settlement arrived with the stated intention of solving the orc problem. They found themselves facing not just Piers, but Kara and the 3 younger women as well, all armed and ready to defend their home. The men, seeing 5 sets of determined eyes and 4 orc warriors who clearly knew how to use their weapons, decided the problem was not worth solving after all and left. But not everyone who came was hostile. Some were refugees themselves, humans who had run afoul of the rigid rules of settlement life and were looking for a place to belong. Others were orcs, lone males or females who had heard rumors of a place where outcasts were welcome. Gradually, almost without planning it, Piers's small homestead became something more. A village of sorts, a place where humans and orcs lived and worked side by side. They built more structures, a proper barn and storage buildings and additional sleeping quarters. They cleared more land for planting and established hunting territories in the surrounding forest. Nara turned out to have a gift for growing things, and under her care, the vegetable garden expanded into an impressive food production system. Shala proved to be an excellent craftsperson, learning to tan leather and weave cloth. Mika had a good head for numbers and organization, and naturally took charge of managing their supplies and planning for the future. 2 years after Kara had been pinned beneath that fallen pine, the settlement had grown to include 15 people, a mix of humans and orcs. They had built a proper meeting hall, a shared space where they gathered for meals and discussions and celebrations. They had established trade relations with a few of the more open-minded human settlements, exchanging their crops and crafts for tools and goods they could not make themselves. It was not always easy. Prejudice ran deep on both sides, and there were conflicts within the community as people struggled to overcome generations of taught hatred. But slowly, painfully, they built something new, a place where human and orc children could play together without fear, where a person was judged by their character and their actions, not by the color of their skin or the shape of their tusks. Piers and Kara's cabin, the original small structure that had started it all, remained at the heart of the settlement. It was there, in the room where Kara had healed from her injuries, that their first child was born on a crisp autumn morning. The labor was long and difficult, and Piers paced outside in an agony of worry as the orc women attended Kara. When he finally heard the thin wail of an infant, he burst through the door to find Kara pale and exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny green-skinned baby in her arms. "A son," she said, her voice hoarse but filled with joy. "We have a son, Piers." He approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at the impossibly small creature in his wife's arms. The baby had green skin like his mother, but his features were softer, more human. Tiny pointed ears peeked out from beneath a shock of dark hair. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Piers asked. Kara carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Piers cradled his son, marveling at how light he was, how fragile. The baby blinked up at him with eyes that were still cloudy but would likely become amber like his mother's. "What should we name him?" Kara asked. Piers thought of his father, of the quiet man who had taught him to work with his hands and be self-sufficient. "Thomas," he said, "after my father, Thomas Malone." "Thomas," Kara repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Thomas Malone, first son of the new way." As if in response, tiny Thomas wrapped his impossibly small hand around Piers's finger and held on tight. Piers felt his eyes fill with tears. This tiny being, this perfect blend of human and orc, represented everything they had fought for. Proof that two peoples who had hated each other for generations could come together and create something beautiful. "Welcome to the world, Thomas," Piers whispered. "Your mother and I have quite a story to tell you about how we met." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new growth to the settlement and new joy to Piers and Kara's family. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy, followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Elia, after Kara's mother. The children played freely with the other half-orc children born in the settlement, as well as with full human and full orc youngsters. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Piers and Kara would sit outside their cabin and watch the sun set over the settlement they had built. Sometimes they talked about the early days, about the fallen pine tree and the 2 desperate days of sawing, about the moment they had first admitted their love. "You ever regret it?" Piers asked one evening. "Leaving your clan, Binding yourself to a human. Kara looked at him like he was crazy. Regret you. Regret this. She gestured to the settlement, to the smoke rising from cook fires, to the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting on the evening air. How could I possibly regret any of it? We have faced a lot of hardship. The prejudice, the threats, the struggles to make this place work. And we have also experienced more joy and love than most people ever know. Piers, you saved me from death under that tree. But more than that, you saved me from a life of emptiness. You showed me what it means to truly live, to choose your own path, to love without boundaries. How could I regret that? He pulled her close, kissing her temple. I love you, Kara Malone. And I love you, husband. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. You are mine and I am yours until the world ends. They sat together as the stars came out, comfortable in their silence, secure in their love. Somewhere in the settlement, someone started singing, an old orc ballad that Kara had taught them. Other voices joined in, human and orc blending together in harmony. Piers thought back to that morning when he had heard a scream in the forest and had run toward it without hesitation. That single decision had changed everything, had set in motion a chain of events that led to this moment. If he had ignored that scream, if he had been too afraid to help an orc in need, none of this would exist. Kara would have died under that tree. The settlement would never have been built. His children would never have been born. It was staggering to think about how much had hinged on that one choice. What are you thinking about? Kara asked, as she so often did. About the day I found you under the tree, about how everything changed from that moment. Do you know what I was thinking when I was trapped there and heard you coming through the forest? Kara said. I was certain you would kill me. I thought, this is how it ends. Pinned beneath a tree, helpless, killed by a human who will finish what the forest started. I had made peace with it. I am glad you were wrong. So am I. She turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. You know what the strangest part is? I think everything happened exactly as it was meant to. The storm, the tree falling, you being close enough to hear me, all of it. We were meant to find each other, Piers. We were meant to build this. I think you might be right. They stayed outside until the fire inside beckoned them to bed. In the morning, there would be work to do, as there always was. Fields to tend, children to teach, structures to maintain, disputes to settle. The endless tasks of building a life and a community. But tonight, Piers Malone was simply a man sitting with his wife, grateful beyond measure for a fallen pine tree and the 2 desperate days he had spent sawing through it, for the courage to carry a wounded orc woman a mile to his home, for the love that had grown between them against all odds. He had started that journey wanting only to save a life. He had gained a wife, a family, and a purpose beyond anything he had ever imagined. And as he lay down to sleep beside Kara that night, her warmth solid and real beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Because some things, some people, were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Worth sawing through a 3-foot pine tree for 2 days straight, no matter how much your hands bled or your shoulders screamed. Love was worth it. Always. And they lived together in their frontier village, raising their children and welcoming anyone who needed a place to belong, building bridges between peoples who had been enemies, proving that with courage and compassion and stubborn determination, the world could be changed, one kind act at a time. Their story became a legend in the region, the tale of the human who saved an orc woman from a fallen tree and somehow started a revolution. But to Piers and Kara, it was never a legend. It was simply their life, strange and beautiful and completely their own. And every year on the anniversary of the day the tree had fallen, They would walk together to that clearing in the forest where the massive pine still lay, now weathered and slowly being reclaimed by the earth. They would stand there hand in hand, remembering those desperate days, remembering the beginning of everything. "Thank you," Kara would say, as she did every year. "For what?" Piers would ask, though he knew the answer. "For not walking away, for seeing me as a person worth saving, for loving me when the world said it was impossible." And Piers would pull her close and kiss her, there in the clearing where it had all begun, and whisper against her lips, "I would do it all again. Every moment, every hardship, every struggle, because it led me to you. And you, Kara Malone, are worth everything." Thomas and Aaliyah grew strong and healthy, becoming leaders in the settlement in their own right. Thomas inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's fierce determination, while Aaliyah had her mother's hunting skills and her father's kindness. They, in turn, had children of their own, and the settlement continued to grow. 3 decades after that fallen pine had trapped Kara, the settlement had become a proper town, recognized even by the distant human capital as a legitimate community. Trade routes ran through it. Merchants stopped there regularly. And most importantly, it stood as living proof that humans and orcs could coexist, could build something together, could even love each other. Piers and Kara grew old together, their bodies aging but their love as strong as ever. They watched their grandchildren play in the same yard where they had first built their expanded cabin. They saw the town council, made up of both humans and orcs, make decisions that benefited everyone. They witnessed the slow, gradual healing of centuries of hatred and fear. On a warm summer evening, when Piers was 63 and Kara was 60, they sat together outside their cabin as they had done thousands of times before. Piers's hands were gnarled now with age and old injuries, but Kara still held them gently, as she always had. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Changed the world. Just a little bit, but we changed it." Piers looked at the thriving town around them, at the human and orc families living side by side, at the children of all colors and shapes playing together without a second thought. "I suppose we did," he agreed. "Though I never set out to change anything, I just wanted to save you. And in saving me, you saved us all." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "I love you, Piers Malone. From the moment you took that saw to that cursed tree until my last breath, I will always love you. And I love you, Kara Malone, my fierce warrior, my beautiful wife, the mother of my children and the heart of my life. You are everything to me." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Two people who had defied the world and won, who had chosen love over hatred and built something lasting and good. The story of the fallen pine that had pinned an orc girl for 2 days, and the human man who had sawed through it alone and carried her home, would be told for generations. But for Piers and Kara, it was never just a story. It was the beginning of their forever, hard-won and precious beyond measure. And as the night fell soft and warm around them, they knew with absolute certainty that they would choose each other again, in any life, in any world. Because true love, the kind that crosses all boundaries and overcomes all obstacles, never ends. It only grows stronger, like the rings in a tree, marking the years and weathering every storm. And their love, born in desperate circumstances and nurtured through countless challenges, was the truest love of all. They lived out their remaining years in peace and joy, surrounded by family and friends, secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. And when at last they passed, within a few months of each other, as if even death could not keep them apart for long, the entire town mourned and celebrated them. They were buried together in the clearing where the fallen pine had once trapped Kara, the tree now completely returned to the earth. A simple stone marked their resting place with an inscription chosen by their children. Here lie Piers Malone and Kara Malone. He saved her from the tree. She saved him from loneliness. Together they saved us all, and in the town they had founded, life continued. Human and orc children played together, learned together, grew up together. The barriers that had divided their peoples for so long continued to crumble, replaced by understanding and cooperation, and sometimes, in the best cases, love. The legacy of Piers and Kara lived on, not just in their descendants, but in every human and orc who chose kindness over hatred, who saw past surface differences to the person beneath, who believed that a better world was possible and worked to make it real. Because in the end, that was what their story had always been about. Not just two people falling in love across an impossible divide, but the proof that bridges could be built, that walls could come down, that even the deepest hatreds could be healed with compassion and courage and stubborn, relentless hope. And it had all started with a scream in the forest at dawn, and a human man who had run toward danger instead of away from it, who had spent 2 desperate days sawing through a tree to save a stranger, who had carried a wounded orc woman a mile to his home, and in doing so had carried them both into a future neither had imagined possible. That was the true magic of their story. Not grand gestures or dramatic battles, but simple, profound kindness in the face of suffering. The choice to help when it would have been easier to turn away. The courage to love when the world said it was forbidden. And that choice, that courage, that love, changed everything. The settlement prospered for generations, a beacon of hope in a world still learning to put aside its ancient grudges. And always at the heart of it was the memory of Piers and Kara, the human and the orc who had proven that some things, some people, were worth fighting for, worth saving, worth loving with everything you had, no matter what the cost. Their story never ended, not really. It lived on in every act of kindness between former enemies, in every friendship that crossed the lines of species and culture, in every child born to parents who chose love over tradition. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, the people of the town would gather in the clearing where Piers and Kara were buried, and they would tell the story again. The story of the fallen pine, the 2 desperate days of sawing, the mile-long carry home. The story of how one act of compassion had sparked a revolution. The story of how 2 impossible people had found each other and changed the world. And listening to that story, children of all colors and shapes would understand that they too could choose kindness. They too could build bridges. They too could love without boundaries or fear. Because if Piers and Kara could do it in a time when it seemed impossible, then anything was possible. That was the final gift they left behind. Not just a town or a legacy, but hope. Pure, unshakable hope that love could triumph over hatred, that courage could defeat fear, that one person choosing to do the right thing, even when it was hard, could make all the difference. And so the story ended where it began, in a forest clearing with an impossible love and an equally impossible hope. But unlike most stories, this one did not really end at all. It continued, generation after generation, living proof that the best stories are the ones we choose to make real through our actions, our courage, and our love. Piers Malone had heard a scream at dawn and had run toward it. That single choice had changed his life, changed Kara's life, and ultimately changed the lives of countless others. And if that was not magic, if that was not a miracle, if that was not proof that the world could be better than it was, then nothing was. The fallen pine had pinned the orc girl for 2 days. He had sawed through it alone and carried her home. And in doing so, he had carried them both into a future filled with more love, more joy, and more hope than either had ever imagined possible. And they lived happily ever after, as all the best love stories end. Not because their life was perfect or easy, but because they faced it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, bound by a love that had been forged in the hardest of circumstances and proven stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart. That was their story. That was their triumph. That was their gift to the world, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.